Hello, everybody, and welcome to GP1 preseason testing here at the Sebring International Raceway. We're going to take a look at some of the cars out here and get a highlight of this brand new series of just to see who will be strong here in GP1. A little bit of background about how this project has gone. So these are basically a series that essentially has created because Formula One had become way too restrictive on who they wanted entering the series. So GP1 was created. GP1 has 32 cars going for 26 spots on the grid, various levels of team ability. These are all either teams that used to be in F1 or teams that will, or that wanted to get into F1 but couldn't, so they formed their own league. We do not race on any F1 tracks, any tracks that have that are currently in the F1 schedule, with the exception of Monaco, because they have now switched allegiance from Formula One over to GP1 because Formula One wasn't letting them get what they wanted, and GP1 said you can have whatever you want here. So, with that being said, it's going to be an interesting series, I think, because a lot of cars and teams are going to be teams to watch this season. We are going to go through the order now and see what some of these teams are going to be like and predict how they're going to do. That will be very interesting to see going forward. Our first team to watch will be Toyota Gazoo Racing, the Panasonic Toyota team. Toyota is back into open-wheel racing, this time with an all-Japanese lineup of Kamui Kobayashi and Ryo Hirakawa. Kobayashi is expected to be one of the championship favorites this season. It would not surprise me if Kamui Kobayashi ends up grabbing that standings. Toyota also has Hirakawa. Hirakawa is a younger driver, expected to be really strong, but probably needs a little bit more development time for Ryo Hirakawa. I would not be surprised at how long, to see if it takes a little bit of time to develop Hirakawa. In preseason testing, this team is incredibly strong, and we will see how the Panasonic Toyota team, or the Toyota Gazoo Racing team does this season. Great to see them on the grid. Alain Prost has brought his team back, this time with help from Peugeot. Peugeot is back making open-wheel cars as well. This is Charles Pic, and they have an all-French lineup, I should say. Charles Pic and Jean-Eric Vergne are their two drivers. The Peugeot engine is one of the weaker engines, I will say that. But their car is but the Peugeot engine's also lightweight, so their car is incredibly agile as you sling it around corners, etc. Going to be something to watch going forward with Charles Pic and Jean-Eric Vergne. Both drivers, though, former Formula One drivers. I'm interested to see how they stack up right now. Vergne is 11th, and Pic is currently 9th on the grid, or on preseason testing. So we will see how that plays out for them going forward. I know this looks like an old Williams car, but this is the BMW racing car. BMW is on the grid this time with drivers Sheldon van der Linde and Timo Glock. This car is the most powerful engine down the straight line. This car will be very quick at the high-speed tracks like Hockenheim and Pukekohe. Oh, but van der Linde just spun it and backed it into the wall. I don't think it did that much damage, but Sheldon van der Linde, first time I think in an open-wheeler. Van der Linde, I should say, just spun it off the road there. Going to be interesting to see how he recovers. Oh, that's Glock. I'm sorry, not van der Linde. Van der Linde is being held up by one of the Lotus cars. These cars are incredibly quick down a straight line. Van der Linde is 4th. Glock is currently running. He's the fastest car on the track before he spun. I'm pretty sure he's going to need to bring it down pit road, down to the paddock area to get some new tires on that car. But both drivers will be ones to watch this season. I think Glock is going to be the lead driver for BMW, I think, this year. But I wouldn't be surprised if van der Linde does improve throughout the season this year. Next up, we have the Jordan team. Eddie Jordan is back on the grid, this time with a lot of help from a we cannot say company because they are banned to be sponsoring in a lot of other places. But this is Bitten Heroes is the sponsor with help from MasterCard for Eddie Jordan's team. Great to see him back on the grid with Jack Aitken and Connor Daly. Daly, of course, just went to the garage. This team, they're running Ford engines, and they're not the factory Ford team. Ford is pretty poor on power, but the Jordan team has a pretty good middle of the pack car. Ooh, looks like we lost some cars down in that corner too throughout this session. But Jack Aitken, great to see him in a top line racing car for the time being. And Connor Daly, who's not out on track right now. We're expecting Aitken to be the faster of the two drivers, the British driver to be faster. Daly, on the other hand, I'm thinking might be a little bit more of a struggle to get him up the grid. Aitken was currently 15th on the grid in preseason testing, and Daly is 22nd. Oh, Daly's back out again. Connor Daly, the IndyCar driver, former IndyCar driver now, is racing for Jordan. A lot of Irish heritage with that because, of course, Connor's dad, Derek Daly, was a former Formula One driver driving for an Irishman, obviously, even though he's American. Connor Daly will be interesting to see. He's 22nd right now. That's not where you want to be, considering that in a normal race weekend, only 26 cars will make the grid. And, wow, one of those Acura Hondas are just flying around here. The Honda team is looking quite strong today. We'll get to them in a little bit. But yeah, Jordan doing a really good job on this order right now. Hello to Honda. Honda is the next team on the grid. This is the Marcus Armstrong, Ryan Briscoe team for Honda. Briscoe is, of course, now the fastest driver in this session right now. And Marcus Armstrong, another driver that we're going to be watching, I think. Armstrong and Briscoe, Honda has come to play. Honda, they got in through a technicality because Red Bull in Formula One is using Honda powertrains, but they're not technically in the series. So Honda can be in GP1 at this stage. And it doesn't really restrict us to engine manufacturers either. So Honda is going to be incredibly strong here. I think they're going to be fighting with the Toyotas at the top, Toyotas and BMWs for wins. They should be fun to watch, I think, this year. Marcus Armstrong, the New Zealander, is an incredibly quick driver. We're looking at him right now. And Ryan Briscoe, the former IndyCar driver, Armstrong just went 4th fastest. And Briscoe has been blisteringly quick. Yeah, former IndyCar driver, went over and did some sports car racing, endurance car racing, and now is back in open wheelers. Ryan Briscoe will be a driver to watch this year. Here is the factory Ford team. Jaguar is back on the grid. They've decided to bring Jaguar back. They've got a ton of, but the factory Ford team, I will say this, they've got a ton of funding behind them, but their car doesn't look that strong. Hawksworth has proven that their car is not the most powerful, but they do have a good chassis and aero. So I would expect Hawksworth and teammate Jensen Button. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Jensen Button's one of their drivers. Jensen Button, former Formula One champion, Jensen Button, will be a driver to watch in the Jaguar team this year, Jaguar Ford. They're a very good chassis, very good aerodynamic team. Their engines just need a little bit of work, and actually reliability has been a bit of a problem for the Jaguar team as well so far. They've been struggling, to say the least. Say hello to the second Geely-powered car. This is the Lotus team. Lotus with Stoffel Van Dorn and Tristan Vautier driving for them. This team is, they're quick, to say the least. They're quick, but engine power isn't there, to say the least, obviously, because it is the Geely engine. But because of that weight saving, they did end up, well, they did end up being good on some of the slower tracks. So in the corners, Vautier, who's 15th in the standings, and Van Dorn, who's 26th. I don't necessarily know if I'd want to be down there, but Van Dorn and Vautier will be someone to watch as we get going this season. In the Lotus car, again, the Geely, not the fastest engine on the planet, but they'll be an interesting team to say the least. Hello, Force India! Welcome back. Vijay Mallya has finished a lot of his, needless to say, this is Vijay Mallya owned, but he's kind of taking a step back due to legal issues. Vijay Mallya's Force India team is on the grid with an all-Indian lineup with Jahan Daravala and Kushmiani. Both drivers are, they're mid to lower field cars, I think. They've got the only Volkswagen engine. Their car, again, is a mid-range car. Ooh, somebody's blowing up in the back. Is that one of the Prosts? Yes, it is. Jean-Eric Byrne blew up, but or is having issues. Watch Daruvala, though. Daruvala is one of the young heroes coming in the grid right now, but Miani, on the other hand, has been quite a bit off the pace from Daruvala, to say the least. Richard Branson is back in Formula One, this time, or not Formula One, GP1, I should say. He used to own a struggling team back in Formula One. They have BMW Powers with drivers Philippe Drugovich and Nick Cassidy. This is Cassidy we're looking at. This car is the epitome of put a really strong engine in it and basically do nothing else to it. They've got the BMW engine, so they are a bullet in a straight line, but once you come to a turn, they lose all kinds of ability. So on some of the slower speed tracks, they might not qualify. So they're going to be a struggle. There's Cassidy. Where is Drugovich running? Drugovich is dead last. Although he only did a 4-minute 11. Oh no, he did a 2 minutes 25. Again, you got to be quick in this series to make the grid. You got to be in the top 26 to make the grid every week. And there will be a constructor standings basis for how you get into pre-qualifying. So, if you're in pre-qualifying, and they have more issues with that car, it looks like. So problems for the Virgin Racing team right there. Hastian Racing is on the grid with their Lamborghini engines. This is Mick Schumacher. Mick Schumacher and Lucas de Grassi. Schumacher taking... Oh, de Grassi just blew up in his Lambo. Lucas de Grassi, the Brazilian driver, former Formula E champion and F1 driver, and Mick Schumacher. They're driving a pretty decent car. Schumacher 5th on the preseason testing order, and de Grassi down in 12th. That car's actually pretty quick, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be surprised to see them do a number of work, although de Grassi has been faster in preseason testing. Maybe just not in this session, but than Schumacher. De Grassi has been quite quick. Here comes one of the candidates for worst car on the grid. There's a couple of them that might go for it. This is Roy Nassani's Minardi. Paul Stoddard has brought back the Minardi name, along with Jack Doohan. Doohan, I don't think is... Oh yeah, Doohan is not on track. They are currently running 31st and 28th. They're going to be a contender for probably not going to qualify for many races at this rate. Their car, they're using Ford engines, the Minardi team is, and needless to say, they don't look that strong, to say the least, at this point. Nissani has been one of the slowest cars out there, one of the slowest drivers out there, and Doohan hasn't been much quicker. Watch both these drivers, though. If they make a race, that would be I think they'll have a chance to make a race, because I think their car is decent on some of the slower speed tracks that we might get to. And they haven't had mechanical issues, it's just a slow car. Here might be the worst car on the grid, as the Waukeshaws are back in open wheel racing. This is Ryan Waukeshaw's bringing back the Arrows team and even brought back an old paint scheme from the old F1 days. However, they've decided to build their own engine, which isn't very good. Alessio Daletta and Nicholas Latifi are their drivers, and they have both looked... That team's going to need some work, to say the least. However, updates might be expected later on. The Australian-based team, one of the BMWs is off again in the back. Seems like we see a lot of the BMWs flying off. I am concerned about this team making races. I will say that. Their car has their Arrows engine is the least powerful on the grid. Doesn't seem to be able to get out of its own way. And Daletta has made some very uncharacteristically bad decisions. I mean, chopping off, who is that, Herta? Yeah, Herta there. Not one of Daletta's better decisions there. And to just show kind of how bad Daletta is, he would then do this right afterwards. So, Alessio Daletta, probably the weakest driver in GP1 right now. Here is the other team that wasn't allowed to enter the Formula One grid. This is Andretti United. And this is another shaky operation because Zach Brown owns the United portion of the team, and he's in F1 because he owns McLaren. But United Autosports is not in Formula One, so they are allowed to be in here. Well, Andretti Autosports is on the grid today. This is Brendan Hartley. Hartley will be someone to watch. They're running Cadillac powertrains, GM powertrains, so I would be very interested to see that. They've got a pretty all-around car. They're a really good mid-range car. They're currently 8th with Brendan Hartley. Let's take a look and see where Colton Herta is in the 15 car. He's down in 17th. Herta is one of America's next big hopes. I think even more than Connor Daly. He's expected to perform well this year, Colton Herta is. I would be very interested to see how this team plays out when we get to Barbagallo for the first round of the season. Sauber is back on the grid, this time with Lamborghini Motors. And yes, that is Kimi Räikkönen. And I do have to change the numbers. Oh, one of the BMWs went off in the back. Kimi Räikkönen is back full-time in an open-wheel series. I'm excited to see what Räikkönen's going to do here. The car is moderately quick, too. That Lambo motor, not the most reliable one out there, but it is fast. It is incredibly quick. They've got a really good chassis under it. Aerodynamics could use a little bit of work with Räikkönen, and alongside of him, we got Felipe Nasr. I just have to change the numbers on him. Nasr's third! Nasr is really quick. The Brazilian is very quick for Sauber today. I'm very happy to see that. They also have Petronas sponsorship. So they're a very heavily funded team. I'm quite glad to see them on the grid. Felipe Nasr, though, I wasn't expecting him to be third. And the last team we're going to be looking at here is the Panthera Team Asia car. This is Ahmad El-Harthi driving that car in the 9 car, and Rio Haryanto driving the 10 car. Panthera, oh, somebody's off in the back. Oh, it's one of the BMWs again. What a shock there. Rio Haryanto and El-Harthi are driving one of the Geely-powered cars, a Chinese engine manufacturer. The lightest engine on the grid. Also the least powerful engine on the grid, but these cars can be thrown around everywhere you go. Excuse me. Everywhere you go, you can throw these cars around. And so they're going to be a mad strong team when you get down to the slower tracks, I think, on the schedule. All right, everybody. Well, this is the final order from preseason testing seeding session. The last session of preseason testing determines who goes into pre-qualifying for the first race and who doesn't. So the way this works is everybody's position... Every team's positions from this session were added up. So a first place equals 1 point, a 9th place equals 9 points, and the example is you want to have the lowest number of points possible. So we're going to go through the order here, and we're going to kind of see which teams are going to make the grid and which teams are not. Ryan Briscoe for Honda and Marcus Armstrong finishes 4th. So Honda makes the grid with only 5 points. They were the best overall um in just overall qualifying or in preseason testing. Honda, great job. Kamui Kobayashi and Ryo Hirakawa are the Toyota team. They will also be in because they, I think, finished third in overall testing. Sauber was the big surprise here with a third and a fifth, with Nasr and Raikkonen there. I am very happy to see both of those cars really high up the grid. Great job for Nasr and Raikkonen. They have qualified themselves on the grid with their Lamborghini-powered car. When they're not blowing up, they're quite quick. Great to see Sauber up there. Pastian Racing, Mick Schumacher pulled off a lot of heroics there. Finishing fifth. That's going to get them on the grid because I think Schumacher got a little higher than what that car is really capable of doing. He was punching well above the weight with that car. Lucas deGrassi down in 14th. I still think they would have made the grid for Barbagallo. However, I think both cars will be mainly mid 14 to 6, like the 10 to 20 range in fastest cars. But great to see Pastian up there. Timo Glock and Sheldon van der Linde for BMW. They're going to be on the grid with a 7th and 9th respectively. Andretti, another team that I really have a hard time figuring out where Andretti is. Brendan Hartley did really well with 10th. Colton Herta down in 19th. That is kind of where we expected Andretti to fall. Their car is probably the most balanced of all the cars on the grid outside of like the high-end cars. They're the factory Cadillac team. Hartley is quite quick, though. A lot quicker than Herta, and Herta's supposed to be the next big thing for American hopes. And he didn't shroud himself in all that much glory during preseason testing, especially in that little incident with Daletta, even though I think that was all Daletta's fault. Jean-Eric Verne and Charles Pic for Prost, they're on the grid. Jaguar is on the grid with Hawksworth and Button in 13th and 15th. Great to see. Now, Jordan is the one team I think that probably made the grid for Barbagallo that maybe shouldn't have. Jack Aitken punching well above that car's weight in 16th. Connor Daly, his teammate, on the other hand, was all the way down in 23rd out of 32 cars. That's a bit shaky, to say the least. And you'll see here with Ahmad El-Harthi, 17th and 24th wasn't enough. They didn't make the grid because El-Harthi would have made it on his own, but Haryanto was slow enough that he wouldn't have made it. So that team is going to have to go through pre-qualifying, but because Force India was more consistent than the Panthera team, they are on the grid. So Daravala and Miani are on the grid while Panthera is not. So that being said, Virgin is not on the grid because with Nick Cassidy coming 21st and Filipe Drugovich coming 25th, Lotus isn't on the grid because Van Dorn down in 26th did not perform as well as we thought he would have, and Vautier down in 22nd. Obviously, we talked about Jordan already. Stefan GP with Mazepin and Maldonado. They're expecting some big grades. I'm not sure what those upgrades are, but we're expecting them. Jack Doohan. Actually, Minardi and Arrows were tied at exactly 61 points apiece. But since Doohan finished higher than Daletta, faster than Daletta, Doohan will be on the grid. Daletta, Latifi, and Nissani round out the grid. Minardi and Arrows are going to be struggling, I think, this year. Here is a more concise list of the teams that will be starting. If you're in green, you will be starting the round of Barbagallo, and if you're in red, you're in danger of not. However, I think Panthera, Virgin, and Lotus all should get on the grid. Meanwhile, Stefan, Minardi, and Arrows. Stefan might play games up there, but Lotus and Arrows and Minardi, I don't see them getting on the grid for a bit. Now, granted, there could be upgrades. every race or two, um, there will be upgrades. Teams will come up with upgrades, and we'll see how they improve the cars as they get going. A couple of teams every weekend, I think, has upgrades for their car. Now, granted, the first two races, since they're flyaway, actually, the first three races are flyaway races, there will not be any upgrades for the first three. However, once Spain comes around, we're going to start seeing upgrades hot and fast. So we'll see how that goes as well. With that being said, Barbagallo will be the first race in the season. We've got a great championship lined up, and I hope you tune in for the rest of it. So long, everybody.